measurements and all that fun stuff, right? We're going to use that information that we've already learned about how many ounces are in a cup, tablespoons are in an ounce, all that fun stuff, to actually adjust our recipes. So it says use your graphic organizer, equivalent measures, and gallon man. We're going to put that on the board there because I have collected that work from you, so we have one thing to work from. And the cookie recipe load to convert the recipe so that you only make 1.5 dozen cookies and then 6 dozen cookies. The original recipe calls for what, Shaylin? How much is yield? What's the yield of the recipe? Top of the recipe. Yep. 3 dozen cookies. So if I need to make 6 dozen cookies, what am I doing to the recipe? Doubling it. If I only need 1.5 dozen, what am I doing to the recipe? Cutting it in half. Okay. So we're not going to need our whole gallon man, but let's draw the head because we will need the head to convert some of this. So the head is equal to what? 1 cup. Okay. How many ounces are in a cup? How many pieces of hair? 8. Okay. How many tablespoons per fluid ounce? 2. And how many teaspoons per tablespoon? So how many per fluid ounce? 6 altogether. You won't need to use the teaspoons for this, but just so you guys have it. Okay? So we have our tablespoons, which we're going to need per cup. So, before we get started, how many tablespoons, blue is the tablespoons, are in 1 cup? 16, because there's 8 fluid ounces, but there's 2 tablespoons per fluid ounce. So there's 16 fluid ounces per cup. We know that the current recipe states there is 3/4 of a cup of shortening, and what else?
Granulated sugar.
And sugar. Okay. We know that we have 1/4 of a cup of what? Eggs. Anything else at 1/4 of a cup?
Water flavoring.
Butter.
Oh wait, that's
Butter.
teaspoon. Never
Is
mind.
that 1/4 of a cup?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
What is it? 1/4 of a
Teaspoon.
teaspoon. We know we have a 1/2 teaspoon of what? Vanilla. Anything else in a 1/2 teaspoon? Okay. We have a 1/4 cup of butter. No, I was wrong. We got a 1/4 what? Teaspoon. Teaspoon. And how much flour do we have? All right, so this is our original recipe. All right, that way we don't have to flip back and forth. Flip to your back side, paper.
Wait, buddy.
Okay. And now we have to convert these ingredients so that we make a different yield. The original recipe called for 3 dozen, and the top box wants us to make how much? So what are we? 1/2. So what are we doing to the ingredients? We're cutting them in half, right? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So I would have to divide fractions in order to do this, right? What did you say, Tashelle? You hate fractions? Anybody else not like fractions? I'd rather not deal with fractions. Is it easier to deal with whole numbers or fractions? Whole numbers, correct? So can we turn this 3/4 of a cup into a whole number? How?
Add 1/4.
Well, we want it to keep it an equal amount, though. We don't want to change the actual measurement. We want it to be the same amount. We could do 0.75, we could do decimals. But Could we also turn it into tablespoons?
Oh, sure.
Right? So a half of a cup is 1, 2, 3, 4 fluid ounces, which is 2, 4, 6, 8 tablespoons. 3/4 of a cup is going to include how many fluid ounces? 6. So how many tablespoons?
4.
How many? 12. So this measurement is equal to 12 tablespoons, correct? Right? This measurement for shortening and sugar is the same amount as 12 tablespoons, right? Okay, so what's half of 12? We have to cut the recipe in half. Okay, so we're cutting it in half. All we need is 6 tablespoons of sugar and shortening. Right? We didn't have to divide fractions. Okay? When it comes to our quarters, we can divide fractions very easily, right? If we think of it as a box. 1, 2, 3, 4. If we have all 4 squares, 4 over 4, we include all of this. 4 over 4 equals what?
1.
1. If I'm only including 2 out of the 4 squares, 2 over 4 equals what?
1/2.
Okay. If I'm including all but 1, I got 1/4. Okay. So let's go down to the half. It's a little easier. What is half of a half?
1/4.
1/4. So we know that vanilla, salt, and baking soda, we need 1/4 teaspoon. Okay. Any other hacks on the board? I think that's it. Okay. Now we might actually have to divide and use fraction, right? Does anybody know off the top of their head what half of a fourth is?
1/8.
Okay, do you know that? Could you just know that, or do you know how to do the math?
I mean, you just double it. Like, you double the denominator.
You double the denominator. So you basically, in order to divide a fraction, you're going to take the 1/4 and you're going to times this number by 2 to get 1/8, right? Because we're taking half of it. So we know that half of 1/4 is 1/8 cup, and half of 1/4 is 1/8 teaspoon. Our last ingredient is flour, right? What's half of 2? 1. So if Kira's having friends over, does she need 3 dozen cookies for 3 people? No. So you probably want to cut the recipe in half so you can each have a couple, but you don't have a whole lot of leftovers. She would come in and she would take her recipe and take the ingredients and divide them in half. Does everybody see how we did that? Yes? Okay. Each ingredient is now half of what it used to be. So my total yield is now half of what it was going to be. Underneath that box, it asks you to make how many dozen cookies? Okay. 6 dozen. This ingredient, my black numbers, okay, these numbers make how many dozen? So what do I have to do to these numbers to make 6 dozen?
Double.
We have to double them, times them by 2. I want you to take a few minutes and times these numbers by 2 on your own and see what you get, okay? You don't have to keep switching back and forth on your paper. These black numbers are the original recipe. I want you to take these numbers and times them by 2.
I thought we got the answers for those already.
You got it for cutting the recipe in half. Now we want to times it. Does that make sense? Okay.
Carl.
So take these numbers. Black numbers on the board. You don't like fractions, right? That's why you don't like that.
See, Rob? I didn't know
Okay. We know that 3/4 of a cup equals how many tablespoons?
Well, I just got middle Greek. Middle Greek. Middle Greek. You gotta say middle Greek?
Yes, right.
You know,
That's all of them.
Y'all got it.
You want times. We're doubling. Yeah, 1.5 equals what? 1A, NA, half. This makes 1.5 dozen, right? You need to make 6. Is it easier to do? You don't want these numbers make 1.5, which is half of your original recipe. You want to make 6 dozen. So what do you want to do to these? Right. You don't want to pay attention to what you've done up here. You want to take your original amounts and double them. But instead of having to flip them back and forth, see the black numbers that I circled? Those are your original amounts. So if you don't want to double 3/4 and use a fraction, 3/4 cup equals how many?
You know about the other tablespoons?
Okay, so what's 2 times 12? So how many tablespoons would you need to double it? 24. Put an X on food coloring. Food coloring is, that's depending on how dark you want it and all that fun stuff. It doesn't have an actual measurement. Good, good. Perfect. Nice job. Would it be 1/16?
I think you're
You're dividing. So, what do you need? Eggs are originally 1/4, right? What is a fraction over 2? What does 2 look like in a fraction?
Stop. Don't talk. We don't gotta talk.
Okay, so 1 times 2 equals?
I'm ready.
So what let's do it for me, if we could take both of them, both of them made it 24. I know you got it. I know because
So we know that shortening is 3/4 of a cup, right? How many times do I do? 3/4 of a cup equals 12. All right, so let's do the doubling as a class. Let's focus in. Okay, we're going to do this as a class. Our original recipe calls for 3 dozen. How much am I asking you for? 6. So what am I doing to 3? What do I do to this number to make 6? By 2. We're timesing it by 2. That's our biggest thing, right? All right. So we know three-fourths of a cup equals 12 tablespoons. We already know that, right? We figured that out. Solid number, okay? What is 12? And then I'm going to times it by my 2. 12 times 2. 24? So how many tablespoons do I need to double this recipe? 24. Okay. My original recipe calls for 1/4. 1/4. What is 2 in a fraction look like? 2 over what? 1. Okay, 2 over 1. So 1 times 2 equals? 2. Okay. 4 times 1 equals? 4. If I reduce this fraction, what do I get? That's how much I need. 1/2 cup. That's my new amount. That's my new amount. Let's do it with the half. 1/2. We have to times it by what number? And that in a fraction looks like? 2 times 1? 2 times 1? 2 over 2 equals what? 1. This is a teaspoon. We'll do it one more time with the 4th. Our fraction is 1/4. We have to times it by 2, which is a 2 over 1. 1 times 2? 2. 4 times 1? 4. We reduce this fraction? 1/2 what? Teaspoons. 2 times 2 is what?
24.
So I need 4 cups of what? Does everybody see that? And you can do the same with your 3/4 of a cup. You don't have to use the 12 tablespoons. You can do the exact same thing that you did before. 2/1. 3 times 2 is what? Okay. 4 times 1 is what? How do we reduce this fraction? 6 minus 4 is what? 2/4 reduces to 1.5 cups. Or 24 tablespoons. Yes? Okay. We're going to do some adjusting on the ingredients, and we'll do that as a class as well. Tomorrow when you come in, I'm going to give you a recipe. It's another cookie recipe, okay? Your team, I'm going to tell you to either triple it, double it, divide it in half, and your team is going to have to come up with those that ingredient amount, and then you're actually going to have to measure out those ingredients. You're going to put those ingredients in a mason jar, and we're going to see what it physically looks like to double. So some teams are going to have double, some teams are going to have triple, and some teams are going to have to divide it in half, and you will physically be able to see the amount of ingredients. Does that make sense? You excited? Tomorrow you get hands-on stuff. Okay, flip it on over to the other side, and what is the recipe called? Okay. I did this one because what did she serve us yesterday as the guest speaker? Mashed cauliflowers. They tasted like? Okay, so can we honestly say that cauliflower would be a good substitute, healthy substitute for potatoes? Yeah, I thought they were pretty good. What'd y'all think? Yeah, you didn't like them, James? It had bacon and cheese in it, y'all.
It tastes like mashed potatoes. I thought it was gonna taste like.
I didn't even eat no bacon in
You
mine.
talking about that little bread stuff?